this workshop on maximizing the benefit of diversity through culturally responsive teaching in your classroom. So today we will explore how culturally responsive teaching framework developed by Geneva Gay can enhance your teaching and create more inclusive learning environment that honor the diverse cultural backgrounds of you and your student. My name is Lynn Nguyen. Mine pronounced as she, her. I am a recovering chemistry professor. After over a decade of teaching in higher education at various institutions, including NIU, I transitioned to educational development in 2023. I am currently serving as an inclusive teaching coordinator at the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. In this role, I facilitate professional development like this workshop for faculty, for graduate assistant on strategy that promotes equity and excellence in teaching and learning. So that's about me. Before we dive into the content, we have a small group here. So let's take a moment to introduce yourself to the group. If you would share your discipline and what you hope to get out this workshop or what brought you here today. So Amy, can I pick on you to start first?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Amy Boyles, and I'm in the history department. I'm a coordinator with our licensure program, and I'm looking to get information. We actually teach the Geneva, one of her articles, Geneva Gay's articles in our program, and use it as one of our key assessments. So I'm just looking to get more insights and more things to glean with my students.
Thank you and welcome. I see some Zach. Okay. Welcome, Zach. And we have somebody from kinesiology, physical education, somebody from sociology and woman, gender, sexuality study. Becca and Anna, do you want to introduce yourself by, yeah.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Anna Canoni, and I'm a clinical assistant professor and the program coordinator in the speech language pathology graduate program. I teach our kind of intro to graduate school / clinic course in the summer for our entering cohort. So I'm always looking for ways to improve instruction. So I'm just really excited to hear about this.
Welcome, Anna.
Hello there, I'm Becca. I work in the College of Business, and I design co-curricular programming around entrepreneurship and innovation. And so, because I'm working with those students, not as an instructor of record, but doing this programming, I wanted to make sure that I'm engaging fully by maximizing these benefits.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here with me today. So here's a few objectives for our workshop today. By the end of this workshop, you will be able to explain the value of diversity, particularly explore the importance of integrating diverse voices, cultures, and experiences into the curriculum to enrich academic learning and critical thinking, while at the same time fostering a more inclusive and equitable learning environment. Um, the second objective is to explore cultural responsive teaching frameworks. So this framework specifically from Geneva Gay, and I'm gonna put the link to the online book that you can access through NIU Library if you would like to go and read the book and dig deep into the framework. But for this workshop, we will examine and discuss some teaching strategy that cater to students from diverse cultural and linguistic background, helping them feel supported and consequently that's result in them being more engaged in your classroom and ultimately leading to positive academic outcomes. Since Dr. Gay published a book in 2018. There's a lot of development and expansion on culturally responsive teaching. So these topic that we discussed today strictly come from her book, but that the idea of culturally responsive teaching has expanded into a lot of different viewpoint and perspective. And the last thing is implementing culturally responsive teaching technique to empower you and your student in your work. It could be with directly in a classroom, or if you coordinate a program or a teaching graduate student, hopefully you gain tool for improving the curriculum, the classroom interaction, assessment, as well as participation and evaluation for all students. So I want to start with a discussion why diversity, ideological as well as cultural diversity matter in academia. Kenton, do you think, could you mute? We hear some music. Okay, thank you. So in this image, how many people here seen this image before? Just like raise your hand. There's a function on the top bar that you could raise your hand. Okay, so I see 2 hand raised. That's good. So now this image depicts a Vietnamese version of a parable of the blind man. Okay, I see 3 hand raised, of the blind man and the elephant. So I have not investigate the original story, but a lot of the time the story of the blind man and the elephant is credited to come from India. So when I was growing up in Vietnam, I frequently heard this story as a child. And it's a story about a group of blind men who never encountered an elephant before. So when they had the opportunity to present to them that they have an elephant in front of them, each man examined the elephant, but because the elephant is so big, right? So each man only examined the elephant by touching one part of his body, such as the leg, the tusk, or the trunk. And so based on their limited experience, they describe the elephant. So the man who touching the leg of the elephant described the elephant look like a tree trunk. The man who touching the ear described that it looked like a flat, like a mat. And and then the man who experienced the body, the side described as a brick wall. So based on the limited experience, they each describe an elephant resulting in different accounts, right? So in some version, the blind man come to suspect that the other either are dishonest or just foolish. So the moral of this parable is that humans often claim to know about the absolute truths based on their limited and subjective experience, while ignoring the equally limited and subjective and valid experience or perspective of other. So exposure to different viewpoint and perspective known to enhance critical thinking skill by challenging student and you to consider multiple angles of an issue. It helps students develop stronger cultural competence and thereby better preparing them for the diverse world they will encounter after graduation. Zach, I do want to check to see if you have any question or your hand raised still from the previous. Okay. All right. So additionally, when you present student with diverse cultures and perspective, it's challenging student and educator assumption. So it promoting intellectual growth, improving academic achievement, and fostering a more inclusive classroom environment. So our goal isn't necessarily to change anyone's belief or culture, but to create an environment where all culture and ways of learning and ways of knowing can be respected and honored. So I want to take a pause here and ask all of you, what aspect of your student cultural backgrounds do you currently notice in your classroom? And you can pick and choose any of the 3 prompts for our discussion. The workshop is also served as a learning community for faculty. So we create a space so that you can share your experience and learn from one another coming from different disciplines. So, Amy, do you want to say something?
Sure, I can talk. I would say that I have the challenges I've found with some of my students is many of them are commuter students, and so they a lot of times are coming from a lot of them don't really feel, this is from what they've talked about, like necessarily part of the campus community a whole lot, because they just come to classes and then they go back home. And so some of their backgrounds, they don't always feel like a part of the overall campus community. And so I found that to be somewhat challenging in some of the, like their backgrounds when going to their clinical placements and things like that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think I don't have the exact stat from institutional data, but I think I encounter a lot of students who are commuters at NIU. And so, yeah, that's certainly something that challenging. And I will keep my eye out to hear to see if any other faculty have a way, strategy, or practices that they use to help student. Becca?
Hi. So, I'm correct me if I'm wrong. I'd like to talk about challenges when it comes to disability and accessibility. So I don't know if that necessarily applies to the cultural backgrounds, but I, when trying to make co-curricular programs accessible,
Mhm.
I find that I don't know what resources the students need until they're already at the program or the event. And so, like not having um like any systematic way of kind of knowing what resources I should have prepared at each program has been a challenge. Um at, like whether that be an interpreter or sensory friendly like options for the presentations. um that's something that it's been hard to navigate, especially with the resource constrained environment we're in, where we can't just have all the resources every event if they're not actually needed.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm actually taking notes. I can send in the follow-up email, I can send some resources that Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning already put together. And it may not answer to all of your question, right? But at least you will have a guide to make things more accessible. So I'm just gonna make note real quick here to send, make sure I include the accessibility toolkit in my follow-up
Thank you.
email.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And I think although Geneva gave frameworks specifically focusing on cultural diversity, but I think there's the intersectionality, right? So like people with learning disability, they can come from different culture, but then they share the same struggle for accessibility. So I think that's an excellent question, and this is the right place for it. So Canton put in the chat, I've seen how having an area of experiences related to gender, sexuality, both related to LGBTQ AI plus identity and different racial ethnic background make discussion of those topics deeper and richer. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so Before we dive deep into the cultural responsive teaching framework, I just want to do a really quick review of what is teaching and what is learning, right? So traditionally, in higher education, educator typically ask the question of what do I want to teach? At what level of learning do I want to teach my student? But then at some time ago, maybe a decade or two ago, when the student center approach become the new norm, then the question being asked now slightly different is what do the student learn in your class, or what do your student learn? So we rephrase it to make student the center of our pedagogy. So I want to quickly review the Bloom taxonomy, knowing that in the age of AI, there's a new Bloom taxonomy out there that incorporate the technology of using AI. So these are different level of cognitive order, right? So with remembering and recalling fact and basic concept at the bottom of the level of cognitive order. And now with information accessible as a fingertip, like literally, we have to rethink about the way we assess learning. Especially involve activity like describing, recalling, right? The next level is understanding, comprehending of the meaning of the information, and then applying, using the information in new situation. And then analyzing, breaking down information into parts to explore relationship and patterns. And then the next level of cognitive order is evaluating. Now, making judgment based on criteria and standard. So in the age of AI, this become very crucial, right? Your student most likely use AI. So teach them to be able to evaluate the AI output to make judgment whether it's accurate or not accurate is crucial. And then the highest level of cognitive order is to create. So putting element together to form new and coherent whole or make an original product. Now, when you prepare for your class, ask yourself this question: at which level of cognitive development will my student learn in this lesson, in this class today? And then you can prepare your content, activity, and assessment accordingly. So that's the basic level of learning, right? Now, in addition to the cognitive development in your specific discipline, today there's a push from administrator to push demand in a way that our graduate have to learn practical skills like problem solving, communication, creativity, data analysis, etc. Right? So, uh, as educator, we asked to move beyond the traditional subject matter expertise, but to cultivate a robust, transferable skills that will empower a graduate to succeed in any career path. I know this is a lot to ask of you, but culturally responsive teaching pedagogy offers a solution. Offer educators tool to do both. So when you implement culturally responsive teaching practices, you will teach your undergraduate both subject expertise and workforce readiness skill. So for example, when you foster a culturally responsive teaching and learning environment, all students, regardless of their ethnicity and culture, will experience academic success and develop cultural competence and critical socio-political consciousness. Because culturally responsive teaching view academic success is as a holistic development that encompasses personal growth, emotional well-being, the ability to navigate life challenges. So it's more than just obtain subject expertise. It includes developing a broad set of skill that prepare the whole human, the whole prepare student for career and life. So that's why it's kind of bring both subject expertise and practical skill together. So academic success mean helping your student recognize their unique abilities and how to leverage them. Um, One skill in the broad set of skill that prepares students for career and life is developing cultural competence, right? So I keep repeating myself here, but the world is increasingly more diverse, whether we accept that or not, it is, it's a fact. So we need to develop skills that allow us and our students to engage with people from different backgrounds. And when you integrate relevant, diverse people and culture in your curriculum and material, you help students make the connection between their daily lives and the content knowledge they learn in a classroom. You encourage students to be more engaged with the subject, and you will teach them how to have uncomfortable conversation or reading uncomfortable material, but it's going to promote growth. And I'm going to give you an example later. So once students develop cultural competence, they need to apply what they learn to an inequitable society and work toward a more just war, but they will be well equipped to challenge the status quo. So that's the promise of cultural responsive teaching. So let's dive in. This is the definition I took from the book. And as I say, this link right here will take you to Geneva Gay book titled Culturally Responsive Teaching, Theory, Research, and Practice. And it's available at the library, the paperback copy, as well as the online version. So when you click on this link, in the PowerPoint slide, which I will share in the follow-up email, you can access the online book and read through it. So culturally responsive teaching as defined by Dr. Geneva Gay is using cultural knowledge, prior experience, frame of reference, and performance style of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounter more relevant and effective for them. So at its core, this approach recognizes that culture influence how students learn, how they communicate, and engage with educational content. And we have to talk about it because this image that I show you, this is the statistic for our student that I took in the fall 2024, so just last year class. So when we talk about race, 70% of our students identify as student of color. Class, 57% student identify as first generation college student. And then on gender, we have a rainbow, right? Very diverse gender expression. So that's why culturally responsive teaching is crucial in higher education, and particularly here at NIU. So these are some core principles of culturally responsive teaching. The first one is validating. So this pedagogy acknowledging the legitimacy of cultural heritage and connecting them to academic concept. It is comprehensive and inclusive. So in culturally responsive teaching pedagogy, we develop intellectual, social, emotional, political learning teaching. So it's like teaching the whole child, teaching the whole human. So that's why this work require teachers, counselor, administrator, support staff, a classroom, the school, the district, people who make policy, people who invest in instructional practices, everybody, all dimension of education, right? That's why another core principle of this pedagogy is it's multidimensional. So it encompassing curriculum, learning context, classroom climate, teacher-student relationship, and assessment. So subject knowledge and practical skill are taught together, not separately. Like I mentioned earlier, so not only they learn about the subject expertise, but they also learn about real life readiness skill, right? So an example is teamwork. So And teamwork skill can be woven into group projects, so that you can teach the student the content expertise, but at the same time teach them um, to learn teamwork skill, how to foster positive interdependence at the same time holding individual accountable for their work, for their action or inaction. Um, Culturally responsive teaching is empowering because it's building academic confidence through success experiences. So if you are a culturally responsive teaching practitioner, you should plan accordingly and create infrastructure to support the effort of the student so that they will preserve and achieve higher level of academic achievement. And this is done by bolstering student morale, providing resources and support, um, and celebrating individual accomplishments as well as collective accomplishment as a whole class. Um, and then another thing is it transformative. So this pedagogy recognizing the strength of diverse students and use them as instructional resource. And I will give you an example later in this presentation. But something to think about is if you have student or group of students who show verbal creativity, and is something that apparent among this ethnic group of people, for example, then you could recognize it by recognize their storytelling gift by use by have them verbalize their writing assignment, for example. So allowing them to record and transcribe their assignment, their writing assignment, or even give them the option to produce a podcast and then use that to teach technical writing using the transcription of their own verbalized thoughts. So that's an example. So because of those freedom to choose and the flexibility, this pedagogy also emancipatory, right? It making authentic knowledge about diverse ethnic groups accessible to students and while foster validation, information, and pride, which both liberating and empowering. This freedom enables students to forget about all of their social injustice or the way the world treat them and can concentrate more effectively on their academic tasks. So after all, culturally responsive teaching emphasize the human welfare, the dignity and respect of diverse individuals, groups, culture in the US and beyond. So although it primarily benefits those who humanity has been on the margin, but at the same time it serves the majority because our human nature, we want to expand ourselves, right? We want to expand our knowledge. So this approach provides students, regardless of their identity being in the minority or majority, they will gain a deeper understanding of cultures, experiences, and achievements of diverse people across societies. So these core principles manifest into practical strategy that you can implement in your classroom. And those are the practical strategies, what I'm going to share next. So the one thing you could recognize cultural difference as valuable assets instead of deficit. And I'm going to give you an example that I experienced. So in the picture, you see a lot of herb and pills, right? Medicine. So in many parts of the world, especially in Asia, food is often considered medicine. But then in the US, sometime if you go to YouTube, which I have a child who's 9 years old now, and he explore and learn a lot of things from YouTube. But then they have video of YouTuber or social influencer where they show reaction to ethnic food like it's disgusting. So when I introduced my family. I'm married to a white Canadian-born human. So when I introduced them to Vietnamese food, and if the reaction would be ew, and in the past I wouldn't say anything, but knowing what I know now, I often insisted them to choose a different way to express their experience. So consider the bitter melon. I don't know how many of you here know the bitter melon or try it. It's dismayed by many Western palates as disgusting, but then in Asia and even for Asian American community in America, it's still prized for the quality. It can actually regulate your blood sugar. So when I was growing up, people in Vietnam who diagnosed with diabetes, they don't have access to modern medicine, and so they actually use things like bitter melon to help them regulate the blood sugar. So that was just an example when we react to a different culture with disgust rather than curiosity. We blind ourselves to the valuable knowledge that has been developed in a different culture over millennia, right? So that's an example. Other thing you could try is to create supportive learning community that appreciate and honor diverse culture and heritage. So one simple way to achieve this is to cultivate a classroom environment where cultural sharing is normal, is encouraged. Students should feel motivated to learn about their peers' backgrounds and cultures and experience. I attended one session at the Faculty Academy on Cultural Competence and Equity, the FACE, which I highly recommend. If you have time, you should look into it too. So at one of the session, the facilitator led an engaging icebreaker activity. He invited participants to share story about rice. Like, and he began with his own story that reflect his Spanish heritage. But then because of that icebreaker, there's a lot of faculty in the room, and me, myself included, I find some relatable when a faculty, a Japanese American heritage faculty share that she was taught to rinse the rice before they cook. And in the Vietnamese culture, we did the same thing. And so it was a very small icebreaker, but it bring people together, and it's make known to all the participants that this is the place where cultural sharing is appreciated and encouraged. So that's something you could consider. Um, Utilizing cultural knowledge of various ethnically diverse groups to inform curriculum development, classroom environment, teaching strategy, and student relationship. So I when my child go to daycare, and I don't know how many of you remember during the early state of the pandemic, there's the rise in anti-Asian hate was terrifying to me and my community. So what I did were I actually order a bunch of book that teach like pre-K and kindergarten student how to read, but I order books from Asian culture. So they learn to read, but they read story from my culture, the Vietnamese culture, and other Asian culture. I just feel compelled to do that because I know that these classrooms that my children are in, they don't have reading material that related to my culture. And I want to do something in response to the political climate and the danger that the Asian American community faced during the pandemic. So that was my action. I help those preschool teacher. I help them inform their curriculum by donating these books to them. And I did get word that they read those books in a class. And so those are something for you to consider, to think about. Ultimately, we in cultural responsive teaching pedagogy, we want to challenge the racial cultural stereotype, prejudice, racism, and any other form of intolerance. Acts as an advocate for social justice and academic equity, address the power imbalance in the classroom, not just among your student, including the power dynamic between the instructor and the student. They come with less experiences and less degree, but it doesn't mean they have less brain or ability, right? I encounter students who are exceptionally intelligent and ask really good questions when I teach general chemistry here, for example. So the educational community are very diverse. And I just share with you some statistic from NIU community, right? We are very diverse. Our student body very diverse. Our faculty diversity could could be more of a reflection of our student. But right now, what we can do is equip ourselves with knowledge and training about the diversity of our student, right? So we in a diverse world, we share differences, but also similarity, right? So we share a lot of differences and similarity in terms of personality, learning style, life experience, and then race, ethnicity, culture, but then their class, gender, sexual orientation, country of origin, and then ability, disability, cultural, political, religion, and so many things, right? So we all have implicit bias. We should acknowledge that as a human nature. It's the automatic and unconscious classification formed by societal stereotype about others based on identity characteristic. Um, but then what are we going to do about it, right? So in this, I gave you a few examples of underrepresented minorities. So in the past, women might be underrepresented in higher education, but today woman wiggle, elbow our way in, and then in some field, we become the dominant. So in this example, a man major in woman dominant field like nursing or early child education, that person is our new underrepresented minority now. And then an example of implicit bias is having low academic expectation for multilingual learners or student of color. Um, I'm one of those. When early on in my early year, when I first immigrate to the US, because of my lack of English, I were often treated as if I were unintelligent. And that because I understood, but I didn't have the reflect, I didn't have the vocabulary to respond quick enough. Um, so so that's something I want to share for you to consider. And then sometime when uh, implicit bias or bias, if it's not being called out or addressed, it can grow into microaggression. Um, an example is assigning intelligence to a student based on their race, right? And questioning their competence if it doesn't agree with our assumption. Um, so it's essential for us to develop culturally competency in order to do our job well. Um, and uh, I hope I have inspired you to learn more about culturally responsive teaching pedagogy so that we can be better teacher and better learner. And and I hope you're going to implement some of those practical strategy that I should present. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge that you should prioritize yourself. So start small and don't do it alone. Like if you have an ally in your department, you definitely should join forces to work on curriculum together. All right, so now I'm going to stop talking and ask you, um, what did you think about the content that I just present to you. And here's a few prompts for you to consider if you want to share with the group. Do you have a success story of using any of these culturally responsive teaching practices? What do you think might be the biggest challenge for you in this area? Or what strategy will you try? Anna say, I like learning about the core values and will more directly teach on those in my class. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm gonna move on to a case study because I really want to show you some of what I did. It's not directly related to one culture, but it's content relevant. So when the Flint water crisis was the breaking news of every day, every week for a while, I was teaching 200 students in the general chemistry course. So I decided to do something about it. So I provide a context here for you. I've been teaching the general chemistry course for several years. The approved curriculum focus heavily on technical jargon and have no ethical, political, or creative relevance. And I was looking to make chemistry more relevant to the non-major. Around the same time, the Flint, Michigan water crisis make it into national headline. So when I was teaching chapter 6 on solution, these are the learning outcome that the student need to achieve. One is to distinguish among the terms solution, solid, and solvent. And the second learning outcome or learning objective were the student need to be able to calculate the solution concentration in parts per thousand, part per million, and part per billion. So in order to achieve these learning outcome, this is what I did. Yeah, the Padlet won't work. I'm sorry. Let me see. Let me stop sharing this and share my screen. Okay. All right. So can you see my screen on Padlet? Good, thanks. Could I have a volunteer to read the case study for this? This Padlet is an activity that I presented to our graduate student, our graduate assistant who will work a TA in a classroom. And so I want to use this as an example for this workshop because I want you to read some of the comments that our graduate assistant or our teaching assistant put when I present this case study to them. It'd be great if I can have a volunteer read the case study, just the first column about lesson about solution in Flint water crisis.
I can do that.
Thank you so much, Amy.
So just the lesson
the
about
yellow one,
solution.
yeah.
Okay, yep. Flint, Michigan, which switched its water supply to save costs. Within weeks, residents noticed their tap water smelled and tasted unusual. Flint's water was contaminated with lead, which exposed tens of thousands of people to the dangerous neurotoxin. Flint's Black communities were hit hardest because they tended to live in areas with the most poorly maintained water networks. The Flint water crisis is a public display of America's structural and institutional racism. Thanks to democracy, the scandal was uncovered by local citizen scientists, medics, environmental engineers, and journalists.
Thank you so much, Amy. So I list the outcome, the same learning outcome as the one that I just read to all of you. And then I have the graduate student participate in different discussion prompt. I'm just going to pick on the last one. So focus on discussion prompt 3. So in this one, the group work problem I give the student were calculating the lead concentration in Leanne tap water in part per billion. And then does Leanne water safe for her twin baby to drink? And so maybe I have to bring you back to discussion prompt 2. So the story was discovered by Leanne. Leanne is a resident of Flint and a mother of 3-year-old twins. And I don't know if it's matter or not, but Leanne identity is a white woman, but she lived in the Flint area. And so she took the sample of her tap water and she bring it to the local scientist and he measured the lead concentration an average of 2 part per million. Now, part per million is a whole lot more than the limit of lead in water that the EPA allow. So ideally, we don't want any lead in water, but the EPA set an allowance of 15 part per billion, which is like tiny, tiny, tiny amount. But then in her water, it's 2 part per million. So now I give the student all of the number, 2 part per million, and then the limit set by the EPA is 15 part per billion, and I ask them to do the calculation. Now, when I ask the student, how can this approach promote academic vigor while maintaining relevant and fostering academic success, right? So I did not give in, the students still have to know what a part per million, what a part per billion, how to calculate those concentrations. So they need to know which one is solute, which one is solvent, so that they can put the one on the top and then the one, the solutes would go on top, the solvent and the solution mass would go at the bottom of the fraction, right? So this approach, these are the response from our graduate student, our TA. This approach gives students a chance to apply the term they are learning and also give real life concept to those terms. They can apply what they are learning to other problems they might encounter in their own life. A second response is show how science concept people are learning about have appear in real world and have a real bearing on people's lives. It drives home the point that science is first and foremost about the understanding of the world around us. Um, this approach gives students clear understanding of real world impact of their calculation. The lead affects individual family, real life, not just statistic. This understanding make the calculation chemistry feel more meaningful, right? And so on. So even in the hard science field like chemistry, you can still make it relevant, culturally, socially, politically relevant to real life. And that did encourage my student. The engagement was significantly improved. Students talk about it. There's some non-major that based on this particular chapter of that week, they actually decided on their major. So I found this experience was very profounding for me as a teacher, and that based on the feedback I get from my student. So that's just something I want to share with you. I'm gonna get us back to the presentation. And okay, I'm gonna wrap up very soon here. So I do want to talk about some of the benefits when we draw on student background knowledge and when we increase the relevance of the curriculum, it helps student, it's overall helps student more engaged. It's improved attendance for my class. It's increased interest in learning, because otherwise they was learning about solutions, solid solvent was pretty boring, but now they see how it can have a consequence in real life. They're more interested in learning. It's also promoting higher cognitive level of learning. And when they face a very difficult calculation or analysis, they become more persistent because now they see the consequences of having a wrong calculation. So, and then after all, it fosters social emotional learning, and it helps the student have more positive outcome academically, as well as in real life. So some other action you could take on to create a culturally responsive teaching, is and some very small step, right? So rethink the standard learning objective. You could translate the jargon heavy learning objective to relevant learning objective. Something like what you learn or what you get out of this course. Relevance and vigor. So if it helps students understand how the course learning objective will advance them in their future courses and how employer will value the skill, and the content knowledge that they learn from your class. Another thing to consider is translating academic jargon like syllabus to learning guide or explain what office hour mean, and they're not hour where you will be in your office working and do not disturb. And so those are some small things to consider. And then when it comes to grading, think about equitable grading policy. Ask the question, do grade evaluate student acquisition of knowledge and skill or student compliance? What do you think is more fair? Or consider offering retake and redo to promote learning, accepting that mistake is a part of learning, and after they make the mistake, they can view it as a mistake or they could view it as a lesson learned. And if it's a lesson learned, then do you offer them the opportunity to learn from that lesson? After all, culturally responsive teaching practice is about building a culture of care. So we are social creature. We rise to be the apex group of planet Earth because we work together as a species. So they're together we're stronger, but yet there undeniable disparity, right? So our social identity can inform and influence the way we see the world, understand it, and behave toward this. So think about the social identity you have and how they grant or limit your privilege. And then there's so many nuances and complexity that come with being a human. So after everything that we have discussed today, I hope that you will remember these three things about implementing culturally responsive teaching practice. The first thing is be mindful that students have very level of academic preparedness because of their background. And then the second thing is resist making assumption about their capability. And the third one is to get to know your student as much as you can. If you have like 200 students, that's a lot to ask. So maybe you can group them in group and have some group assignment and learn a little bit about them. So after all, having a growth mindset, view mistake as a part of learning. So as a Husky community of educators and learner, do we have a mindset culture where we believe that intelligence, skill, and ability are fixed? You either have them or you don't. Or do we think that it's possible to grow, develop, and learn new skill, intelligent ability, and other aspect of ourselves? And with that, I want us to take a moment to reflect on some the key principle and strategy that we discussed. perhaps identify area where you can grow in fostering culturally responsive teaching and learning in your classroom, and perhaps make a commitment to specific action you would take in your classroom and or in any educational setting. And remember, this is an ongoing process that requires continuous reflection and adjustment. And if you have any question.
I appreciate the example you gave about like modeling with like modeling the culturally relevant teaching with like the books, the with just so students that maybe don't see a ton of diversity, or they don't have a lot of experience with diverse backgrounds, so
Yeah.
just to model that, I
Yeah.
really appreciated that specific
Thanks.
example, so thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Um, and if you think of more, you can always find me. I will share this presentation with additional resources that I used to develop this workshop. And I will share the slide. And once again, if CITO continue to have program to support faculty in their teaching, so you might want to check out our page program and see what else you're interested in this summer. And if you have any question, email us at CITO@niu.edu with any assistance you may need with teaching strategy or technology support. And thank you for being here with me. And I hope you both have a great day.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye. Anna, you still here?